Hello and welcome to The Entrepreneurs on Monocle Radio, a show all about inspiring people, innovative companies and fresh ideas in global business. Today's programme is all about enhancing comfort and delivering the perfect night's sleep wherever your travels take you. First, we'll head to Utrecht to meet the co-founder of a railway company, putting night trains back on the European map.
Even the last night trains that they cancelled, they were profitable. People are really fond of night trains. I mean, they love it to travel like this, and it's a different market, so there's a demand.
And to ensure we're travelling in the correct style, we'll hear from the founder of a Berlin-based loungewear brand, Revered, for its PJs.
Running a business is like a design process. You can design your own business and run it however you want to do it. And I think that's something that I find actually really inspiring in the process.
This is The Entrepreneurs, with me, Tom Edwards. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Chris Engelsman is the founder of European Sleeper, a private initiative to revive and expand the night train network in Europe with services connecting some of the continent's great cities. Having launched its inaugural overnight journey from Brussels to Berlin, the company's expanded its services to include stops in Prague, a seasonal route to Venice, and has plans for a longer-term project to connect Amsterdam and Barcelona. Chris caught up with Monocle's own Andrew Muller, and he began by telling Andrew about the start of the journey.
Yeah, it was about 5 years ago when the European night train was sort of back on track, but we really felt it needed a push. It had been neglected for decades by the national railways, which we found very frustrating because we like the night train ourselves and it's such a logical project for sustainable travel. So it was sort of out of frustration, but also, of course, out of the love for this lovely way of traveling.
So once you've decided you're going to do this, how do you even start? What were the early steps?
Yeah, the nice thing is there's an open access market for international train travel in Europe. So the basics are there, but there's a few steps you have to take. So first you get an account at the infrastructure manager and you can apply for train paths. So for a timetable, basically. And next, the other important step is that you get coaches. You need a locomotive and coaches, of course, to run a train. So we were trying to rent those or to buy those for about a year. And then we finally got the confirmation of the first 11 proper sleeper coaches that we could use for this first service.
And again, I know these are all very basic, simple questions, but this is not something that will have confronted many of our listeners. If you decide that what I really need to buy is 10 or 11 sleeper coaches, where do you go looking for those?
In the end, we decided to rent. There's a few rental companies. This is through our personal networks that we know about these trains and these companies. There's 2 in Germany and there's 1 in Slovakia. So it's negotiating, it's asking around, it's looking for coaches. Maybe there's a few in some yards somewhere in Eastern Europe, just trying. And the main thing why it's so problematic is that the night train product has been neglected for so many years. So there's not many new ones around. We had to try and find something.
Why do you think it was that the night train, the sleeper train, did fall out of fashion? Was it just that people started thinking in terms that their default would be just get on a cheap flight somewhere because it just seemed easier and quicker?
To some extent, but a large part is also because of the neglection by the railways. They have been focusing on the high-speed product for many, many years, and they just thought a niche product like the night train is annoying. But in a way, they misunderstood, really, because there is a market for it and people are really fond of night trains. I mean, they love it to travel like this and it's a different market. So there's a demand. When we started, we were very convinced of this demand. And even the last night trains that they cancelled because of their lack of interest, they were profitable. It's not that there's no demand.
So was your idea, though, always that your market would be people who were travelling for fun, who liked the idea of being on the night train as part of the adventure, people like yourself, basically fellow night train enthusiasts?
Yes, that's you have the real train enthusiasts. They don't even get into trains; they only take pictures of trains. But the travel fans, really, they are our first target group. But obviously, it's not possible to fill trains with only those people. And there's broader demand. I mean, there's younger people, very climate sensitive, so they tend to stop flying. This is an important target group, and also like families who just rather be on a train and have a nice time instead of on an airplane with all an airport with all the hassle. That's the main answer. Is actually there's so many different, and we see it on the trains as well. There's so many different people in all age categories and all type of people, really. I mean, very traditional, old-fashioned elderly people who love to be in a luxury sleeper. And the other end is backpackers who pay for a seat and they have a drink at night. And it's very, very large variety.
I mean, has there been any take-up, I'm curious, by business travellers? Because I can absolutely see the argument for that. If you have a meeting at 9 o'clock the following morning in a foreign city, much better to sort of get off a train refreshed in the same city at 8 o'clock in the morning than find yourself checking in for a flight at 4 o'clock on the back of no sleep at all.
Yeah, we definitely see the market. And of course, our first route, especially the part between Brussels and Berlin, is very suitable for business travel, as it's the one is the capital of the largest economy and the other one is the capital of Europe anyway. So there's definitely business demand. But I do think at the moment for us it's difficult to attract business people as yet, at least in large numbers, because, well, the night train product is still quite old-fashioned, or at least it has the name that it's old-fashioned. And we really want to improve on that, especially the image. So there's certainly a big demand, but we're not getting them on board. And also something with business travelers is also that we don't need all the captains of industry, of course, immediately on the train, but we would have the conferences, university travelers. There are more of them. And really, they're quite conscious also not to fly.
I mean, you mentioned that slightly old-fashioned image that the night train has, which I'm sure is a big part of the appeal of it. How mindful of that do you need to be when you're thinking about upgrading it or modernising it, that one of the reasons people like it is that they feel like they could be travelling across Europe 100 years ago?
We want to add some comfort to it, and it's a crucial thing for a modern night train product, but I also see your point in a way. And a good example is actually that on our night train you can open the windows, which I think, and I'm not the only one, but it's a lovely feature, strangely enough. First of all, for fresh air. I mean, we have air conditioning on most coaches, by the way, but it's nicer to lean out of the window and see the landscape go by. It's a really nice thing, and that would be a pity if on a modernized coach you would have air conditioning and maybe even impossible to open the window.
You mentioned your inaugural service, the Brussels to Berlin one, and I think you launched that about 10 months ago now. Where are you travelling to now, and where do you hope to expand to?
Yes, our first train was between Berlin and Brussels since May last year, indeed. We now, since March, we also extend the service to Prague. So it is quite a long route from Brussels to Amsterdam, through the night to Berlin, and then in the morning you would travel all the way to Prague, which is actually a very beautiful route in terms of landscape and a few nice cities and towns. So that's the first one. And the second route we are now operating as a seasonal train in coming winter. That is a very exciting one between Brussels and Venice, all the way over. So it's also a winter sports train because it crosses the Austrian Alps in Austria, stopping at Innsbruck and the like. And over the Brenner Pass, through the Brenner Pass, all the way into Italy and to the Mediterranean, which is, well, we are very excited about this one. And the last one's that we're working on a larger project to start a Amsterdam-Barcelona train.
Do you see any upper limit on how far this network could go? I mean, obviously, it would require the general geopolitical circumstances to change, but could we be once again on the verge of that idea of travelling from, Paris to Beijing by train? I speak as somebody who would be curious to do that. I've done the Trans-Mongolian Railway from Moscow to Beijing via Ulaanbaatar. I've done a couple of other sleeper routes in Europe, that weird one from Milan to Palermo where they take the whole train off the rails, take it apart, put it on a boat and then reassemble it on the other side of the Messina Straits. trains. And I did a story for Monocle many years ago about trying to recreate the Orient Express on currently available lines, which involved a couple of overnight trips from Budapest to Bucharest and Bucharest to Istanbul, which did make me think, really, how far would people be willing to travel?
Yeah, it's lovely. It's a lovely idea. For us, it's important to focus on the. We have in mind about 8 to 10 routes that would be profitable from the hub, Belgium and the Netherlands. So that's our first focus. It would involve, like I said, places like Barcelona, Milan, Warsaw, Copenhagen, the places that are on a logical distance for a one night. And well, it would be nice if we can take from there the more exciting examples. And I'm sure they would be growing as well. One thing that we find very appealing is to have a night train through the Channel Tunnel at some point. Mm-hmm. So a night train starting in London and then all the way, of course, to various destinations on the continent. That would be but also the most difficult one. I mean, the best one, but the most difficult one to achieve. It's funny that you mentioned the Orient Express, but we had some ideas to organize. There's a very strange but funny night train. It's called Optima Express. It's between Austria and Turkey, almost Istanbul. And we know this operator quite well, and we even thought to exchange coaches at some point, so have a through coach from Brussels to Turkey, but more as a cultural project or a pilot, so who knows? Some of these ideas are closer than we think.
I mean, are you noticing other companies or other entrepreneurs starting to take an interest in night trains? Is there much competition coming at you?
Not so much, because it's quite the thresholds to step in are huge, mainly because of you need to know what to do, right? That's the first part, and we have a lot of experience on board, and we managed to operate the first train. You have to get it profitable, which is also very challenging. But the biggest problem is the availability of rolling stock. You have to find investors to buy new rolling stock or to refurbish existing coaches into more and more advanced night train coaches. So that's one of the biggest issues at the moment.
And for the reasons you mentioned, especially the environmental ones, do you see any kind of renewed interest in the night train coming from the operators of state rail companies, or are they mostly content, do you think, to leave the private sector to it?
Yeah, I don't. Besides the Austrian railways, of course, I mean, they're leading with their Nightjet network. They're leading in Europe, and I really appreciate what they're doing, because they take risk and they invest and they set up something, but they're almost the only ones. I mean, not many others. They do it and they just leave the product, and the railways are very organized, very nationally. So they're concerned with national issues, and there's hardly any state-owned railway who cares about a European network, really. And you have Eurostar, of course, which is basically the French railways. That's an example. So I do think it has to come from private initiatives.
Well, just finally then, and for the benefit especially of any listeners who may never have taken a night train or a sleeper train and are wondering a bit what it's like and whether it's something they'd actually enjoy, how would you sell it to them? What do you enjoy about getting on a night train, even if it's not one of your own?
Now, the best part is to settle in your compartment and to make yourself comfortable and relax for a while. A night train which doesn't leave too late in the night and doesn't arrive too early in the morning is the best one, because you have some time on board. You have time to relax, to read a book, to look out of the window, to hang around with your fellow travelers, have a drink maybe. We have a restaurant car on the train now. You can have dinner even. So that's a very nice, exciting thing as well. And then one thing is also exciting, to be awake in the middle of the night and watch peek out of the window, not waking up your fellow travelers, of course, but have a look at what towns you're traveling through. Open the windows, the curtains in the morning, have a look at the totally new landscape. These are the romantic things that are really appealing to night train traveling.
That was Chris Engelsman, the co-founder of European Sleeper. You can find out more about what Chris and his colleagues do by heading to europeansleeper.eu. You're listening to The Entrepreneurs. Good friend of Monocle, Tom Àdam Vitellins, is the founder of the eponymous Tom Àdam, his family-run loungewear brand founded to encourage comfort and improve the quality of everyday life. Tom stopped by Midori House on a recent trip to London to talk about designing a business you can be proud of and why cold emailing is still a hot idea. He began by telling me why he initiated the brand with something of a unique twist by incorporating his entire family into its operations.
It's a bit of a reverse family business where I started it and then involved my parents, who work with a lot of unconditional love, which comes in very handy. But yeah, as in, like, it's all about how can we create routines of slowness, routines of self-compassion, and somehow, I guess the big vision is like what Phil Knight did with Nike running shoes, where they were like a high-performance running shoe. Now people wear them in the everyday life. I suppose my main challenge or goal is how far can we stretch comfort/loungewear in the everyday life.
Let's go back to the beginning. This is a bit of a cliche, but Ripple dissolved back, best part of 10 years, I suppose now, when you got this thing rolling, because lots of people have an idle fancy. Wouldn't it be fun to start a business where ... And actually, most people never even get beyond that conversation.
Yeah.
This program is the entrepreneurs. The folks that we talk to don't just have the idea, then the conversation, then they actually do it. And I'm always amazed at people's facility to do that.
Yeah.
Should we have been surprised, Tom, that you did this? Or were you one of these kids that was kind of selling, lemonade on a lemonade stand when you were 5 years old? Have you always been an entrepreneur, I guess is the question I'm asking.
I love that you call me a kid. I love that it still goes through like a shady, smooth operator, I suppose. I guess I lived in a certain, delusion when I was a kid because, I was like playing professional tennis. I was like being in a tennis academy in Spain. And then I think there was always like a certain drive or striving towards something that I wanted to accomplish. And then my dad was always running a business. He was doing these like folding cardboard boxes for like Lipton and Vivier Clicquot. So I grew up around a lot of packaging samples, a lot of chocolate at the same time. So that was a great perk of my dad doing it. But then again, I was always surrounded by role models, by my parents' friends who were running businesses. So I somehow just thought that, oh, hey, look, this is so great. And I probably sort of looked over the obstacles that other people would look at. And I think when you talk with a lot of friends who are like doctors and lawyers, and it's almost like a generational thing, I think it's really difficult to step out of that path because business is uncertainty. And it's so much about, I think we strive to sort of predetermine things and create this kind of like certain agenda of like, this is how my business needs to run. But I think as I run it, I think it's more about the adaptability of it. And it's almost like that it becomes like a perfect analogy to a tennis match where the opponent, that their forehand works well, but then you never know how it goes on a given day. And I think you kind of need to keep the foundation, but at the same time you need to think, all right, can I chip in like a backhand slice down the line and then maybe I can like draw them out of the court? And I think it's almost the same with business because you have, I think right now, the retail is really struggling, especially these like independent stores. So then you're like, all right, can we pivot this to like a B2B business? Or can we have more of like a low-hanging fruit product that is more interesting for retailers instead of selling 300 euro pajamas, which is like really niche and difficult at times. So I think it's this adaptability, and at the same time somehow, well, now I don't want to be like preaching to become an entrepreneur. I think there are the upsides and there are the downsides, but I think I don't remember. I was reading like one article and it was kind of like, but it was more in the context of being an artist. And it was sort of like, if there is nothing else that you can do besides being an artist, just pursue that path and be an artist. And I think quite often when the times are really tough, I think that's how I feel when I run my business, when I'm like, it's like, it's shit, the cash flow is low, you're delayed on 6 different productions. And then I would like intrinsically ask myself, hey, do I still want to do this? Actually, yes, because it allows me to meet incredible people like you and do so many different things, travel around the world and kind of have all these influences and collaborate with Monocle and collaborate with other companies. And I think it is somehow, as in truth being told, it is somewhat of a dream life that I'm building. And I think that's the beauty of it. And I think sometimes, I think like Brian Chesky is like the only founder from the Fortune 500 companies who has a design education. And I think it's always interesting how he talks about running a business is like a design process. You can design your own business and run it however you want to do it. And I think that's something that I find actually really inspiring in the process.
If we go back to the beginning, so you wanted to do this thing. How did you decide in terms of products? I think we've got a pretty good sense of the values you wanted to incorporate. Easy, sort of reassuring materials, well-sourced, quality, a reassuring nature to things. But how do you go about bringing those kind of bits of abstraction together? You've got to make a product with a timeline and at a cost. So what was that early process like? Did it kind of come together more or less straightforwardly? Was it highly complex? Did you have to keep talking to people who kept saying no to you, for example? What was that like right back at the beginning?
To be very honest, probably all of it. And I think it's interesting because whenever you look back at your early work, at least personally, I'm like, oh my God, this is like horrendous. As in, I can tell you, I wanted to do denim swim shorts. I wanted to do underwear with like a high-tech sealed pocket. And then at some point, as in I was talking with the producers and they were like, dude, like, pardon my English, but what the fuck are you doing? Like, why do you need this? Who is going to wear it? And as in like, there is no way how we can even make it as in they're like, we can make it, but like, it's not going to function. So I think it's like this process of trial and error. And I think for me, there are a lot of things in kind of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you like relate it to a business. But I think one is quality. But I think that just goes by, like quality lasts and quality speaks. And if we talk about sustainability, I think that the kind of like the quality of sustainability is something that is timeless and long lasting. And I think that is like a very important part in that. And then I think I always love to do things a little different. I think there's this saying that only dead fish go with the flow. And I kind of really like that. And then we started with men's underwear. And then I was like, what if we do men's underwear with no logos? Let's produce it in Europe. Let's do it from the highest quality materials. And I think when I started it, there were not really so many brands doing that. And I think with loungewear and putting loungewear on the streets as well, there are not so many brands doing that. So I think for me, it's always like, actually, how can I maintain the authenticity? But by maintaining the authenticity, it's always the kind of fighting your inner demons and not trying to produce something like someone else, but producing something that actually speaks to yourself and that you would want to add to your wardrobe or to your home. And I think that's when you can really see that the customers can relate to it. And it's a difficult process because you are like, oh no, but this product looks very commercially successful. Maybe we should just go for that. No. Let's not do it. Let's just stick to what we're doing and figure out what we need to create and go with that.
Tell me, Tom, so when you're then collaborating, like we said, lots of successful collaborations with Monocle.
Commercial collaboration.
And, well, no, but it's interesting. And clearly, there's shared values, right? Whether it's a certain aesthetic, an emphasis placed on craft or a love of, the curious and traveling and stuff like this. Mm-hmm. But to that point, how do you ensure that you're interrogating the new and sticking to your principles when you have to kind of reflect together with the partner their values and their preoccupations? Is that interesting for you creatively as an entrepreneur, as a creator of things? Does it have a tension? Is it a healthy tension? How does it tend to work?
As in, absolutely. And I think you have the full spectrum, right? You have healthy tension, you have non-healthy tension. And I think it's about really, one is, you need to know who are the right companies that you want to partner with. And if I value the work that they're doing, if there is not an occasion where maybe like there are absolute assholes behind the company, but I haven't stumbled upon that case so far. So all the companies that I personally would want to collaborate with, you're always like, wow, they're like really sweet people. And I think it's more kind of like stepping aside from my own vision and actually being like, hey, what do you at Monocle think would be the nicest loungewear from your perspective? And I think you can only gain. And I think whenever I need to solve problems, of course, I think 30-minute morning walks, evening runs, all of that works. But I think when you talk with someone it's a bit like a therapy session, it's like you can only look at yourself in a very one-dimensional manner. And I think these collaborations give you almost like a mirror where you see the business from outwards in, and that just gives you like a totally different perspective on like, what are the new products that we can develop, because you realize what the communities of other companies would need and how do the people actually look at the product. And I think there is never a point where you're like, I know enough about this product. I don't need to study it anymore. I think there is always, it's like a perpetual digging.
Talk to me about entry points and ongoing relationships with your customers. If people go, for example, if they go on your website, it's really fun. There's a playful quality, as you said, your family feature. There's something very, it's very charming. There's an easy charm to it, which I think is great. And it communicates lots of the proposition. What about meeting clients face to face? Or, I know you've been in different stores, our pop-up stores, for example, with collaborations.
Yeah.
Is there a best way to meet people? It's a product that's nice to interact with. It's great to hold and feel the materials. Are you allowed to have favorite ways of engaging with your customers, or do you have to make sure that you're addressing all the different avenues?
As in, it's an interesting question, truth being told. To be very transparent with you, as in like at the moment, it's probably 70% of our business is like B2B, working with, as in like Monocle collaboration was B2B as well, right? So then we work with @hem in Stockholm, and we signed a second deal with Airbnb, and Airbnb gifted the pajamas to all these wonderful athletes for Paris Olympics. So I would wake up in the morning and like people would send me messages and be like, Tom, what is going on? So you would have like Stephen Curry's wife like taking a picture of the pajamas, and then you would have like Dwayne Wade's and Gabrielle Union in the pajamas in front of Eiffel Tower. And then I would talk with Airbnb and they're like, oh yeah, but like we gifted them to like Serena Williams, Zac Efron, and like Tony Parker. And then they were like, oh yeah, and to Kevin Durant. And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure that he doesn't fit into the extra large.
XXXXXL.
So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was like, we could do like a bespoke edition for that one. But I think sometimes, as in, I find a lot of beauty in contrast, to be very honest. And to give an example, as in how we signed the collaboration with Monocle was, as in, I think I reached out throughout the time span of probably like 12 months, something like that. Always like switching it up a little, testing new things out. And I think the niceness of that is I think people still feel the essence in the email of what you're all about. And I love the contrast of like, you can have the cold email and you can have like a really warm in-person correspondence. And I don't think that one excludes the other. Actually, all the companies that we work with, they all started with a cold email.
Good advice right there. Tom, I could talk to you all day. We've got to wrap, but just tell me one quick thing. What are you most excited about? As we look to the future, it can be something that's happening tomorrow. It can be something that's happening in 20 years. What excites you the most right now? And you have a short period of time to think about it.
Shit, I'm under pressure now. I think just like, all the people that I will meet on the journey of creating the business, and one, helping them out and at the same time learning from them, and then just creating a community around that and seeing where that leads. I think it's kind of, the potential is limitless. And I think as more you give, as more you gain. And it's a bit of like a reverse psychology, but I think as more I try to do it, and I'm not ideal at that, I can really testify that that's the case. Life is a funny one.
That was Tom Àdam Vittelens, the founder of his eponymous label, Tom Àdam. And just since we spoke, Tom's announced that the brand is launching a limited edition loungewear collaboration with @hem. That's on the way in December. And a sleeping mask collaboration with the Greenwich Hotel in New York City. And that's not all. He's been busy. There'll also be a line of food candles. Yeah, that's candles that resemble food like baguettes, tarte framboise, cocktails, all made in Italy by a 6th-generation family company. You can find out more about all of that by heading now to tom-adam.com. And that's all for this episode of The Entrepreneurs. We'll be back at the same time next week. Do look out for Eureka, available every Friday. The Entrepreneurs is produced by Laura Kramer with audio editing by Jack Dewars. Listen again and find out more about the show at monocle.com. That's where you can subscribe to Monocle magazine and read more about better businesses every month. You can also follow us and catch up with the archive wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with the team, do email Laura on lrk@monocle.com. Wherever you're headed, do sleep well, everybody. I'm Tom Edwards. Goodbye, and thanks for listening to The Entrepreneurs.